All right, how's everyone doing? I'm Rich CELENZA. Thanks for checking out my podcast. So, today, what I want to get into is basically, I'm going to call it take your time when building relationships. And I'm going to kind of get into this because I think the one thing I realized over the years and the one thing I see now more than ever is people kind of forcing relationships, and that goes for people that you're interested in or even friendships sometimes. That could just be for trying to find friends in general. I to a certain degree, I'm not going to blame like cell phones, social media, all these different types of platforms, but I do think they contribute to that. Now, I am 100% down with anyone who wants to use technology to meet people. I think it's one of the most incredible tools in the world. I think it's amazing if you're doing something and you can reach out very quickly online to research to see who has the same interests you have. And also, that goes for dating websites, apps, all these different types of things. It's an amazing tool because I think for the most part, and I've talked about this years ago, the only place you could really meet people was usually through friends, family members, colleagues, and just the radius that you basically lived in. And a lot of times I think we were in situations or we lived in areas that we may have lived there or grew up there, but we don't have anything in common with a lot of people there. And I can contest to that because I was one of them. So I lived in Chicago. Even though I love Chicago, I liked Florida and, say, California. I just liked that lifestyle better. And I ended up moving there at 18 years old to Florida and then also lived in California. And that's not a dig on Chicago. I love Chicago, the lifestyle, the food, everything. It just wasn't for me to stay and ground myself. So I remember even thinking growing up, even in through high school, I knew I wasn't going to stay there. I knew it. I was leaving. I was one of those guys who did not want to kind of get wrapped up with a girl officially and say, all right, I'm going to settle down here and then I'm going to build a family here. Because I think, and I've discussed this before on my podcast, one thing I think a lot of people blow is they want to leave their city or state, but they wait too long to do it. And before you know it, they're in high school, then they may go to college locally because it's cheaper. If they stay in state, and then before you know it, they meet somebody, and before you know it, they're getting married there, and then you have someone else who may or may not want to leave, and then you have family involved, then you have kids. Before you know it, you have grandkids, and then you're 75 years old, and then you're moving to where you want to be, and then when you get there, you have barely any energy to do anything that you really want to do sometimes because you're just older. You also may have physical, difficulties or whatever, so your doctors are back home, so you end up having to go back there. It just gets complicated. If you want to get somewhere, I really think the prime age, I'm throwing this out there, is basically from like 18 to 21. And if you want to move out of your city or state, and I get it's expensive to go to a school in another state or in another area that you want to go to, but it may be worth the money because you'll go there and you'll actually, I think for the most part, at least test it. Because I also think a lot of times it's a fantasy. So I knew even friends that were like in Chicago that went to college in Chicago always wanted to go to, say, another area. And then, they always complained they never got to that area. But the truth is they should at least test it, is what I should be saying. Because if they would have tested it, it may not be all cracked up to be what you think it is. But back to relationships. And it's going to fall into that as well, is a lot of people, I think, more than ever, are forcing relationships, especially if they've been in a relationship for a long time. They could have been engaged before, married, divorced. And I think back to social media, and I remember after I got my divorce, what's quite interesting about social media is you can just be hanging out with people. It could be the opposite sex, friends that are girls, guys, whatever you are, the opposite sex, and take photos, and people immediately think you're dating. They immediately think you're in a relationship, and a lot of that's bullshit, right? It's just designed that way. Unless people know your past history, but especially if you're hanging out with someone new and they see you take a picture with a girl and whatever, and then another week later you're still hanging out with them, they automatically think that. I think it's just a natural thing. which I found kind of ridiculous. And I think, though, when when you meet somebody online a lot of times and you have a lot of things in common with one another, when you meet them, which is great because you already know that, that familiarity, and you say you both like fitness, you both like certain types of foods, and you both like all these things, and then you meet each other on a dating website, or you met somebody through Facebook or whatever, your friends put you together, whatever the case may be. You start going out, and then even socially, it's very public. So now everybody's looking at you, commenting on you, and you're really throwing it out there, I think, sometimes maybe way too early. Because I would say the one thing I did like about the old days, and I'm not trying to sit here and be an old-time guy, I hate that shit, but before we had time to kind of grow without all the noise, and you can build off that relationship, or now it kind of goes from a 0 to 100. Not only, you personally, but also in a social environment. Because now if you start posting things, back to social media, everyone sees it. Your mom, your dad, if they're on Facebook, let's just say I'm just using Facebook for an example, your grandparents, your aunts, your cousins, then everybody wants to meet that person. Then, all these things start coming very quickly together. Where before, if you were dating somebody, one is no one knew your business. So if it didn't work out after a month or two, right, no one really had to know about that. There weren't pictures constantly. There weren't posts. There weren't shares. And then, you may have taken your time to bring that person around your family. But if you date somebody who's involved with social media, very quickly they're going to start, throwing you out there. Not in a bad way, but they're going to start showing you as a couple, when the reality is, if you've only known each other a week, 2 weeks, a month even, are you really a couple? But I think sometimes, you feel that pressure, or it just starts to develop, not even naturally. It's just almost like a show. So back to the old days again, the one thing I also liked about the old days is taking your time and just letting it ferment, and learning about that person just kind of independently. Not having, again, everybody else kind of, involved, I guess you could say, in your relationship. Constantly asking you about your relationship. What's your status? What's this person like? All these different types of things. Because I think that can also take a toll on your relationship. I definitely do. Because, when you meet somebody, and this also could be with friendships too. I'm not just saying if you find someone that you like or that you want to date or whatever. I think, too, sometimes with friendships, if you meet socially or whatever, it kind of goes from 0 to 100 again. And then, it's a weird dynamic, I realized, even with friends that I met, or, that if you post a picture, they post a picture, you're hanging out with someone new, whatever the case may be. They're like, who's this person? And before you know it, it's really nobody's really business a lot of times, and sometimes when you just start hanging out with someone new, you may have met them for coffee, a buddy, you may work out with them, you may want to bring them involved, because a lot of us have cliques, maybe not. But again, with social media, I think, and things in that nature, it kind of gets rushed. Where before, I don't know about you, but I'm 50, but before my relationships were built, because of the things I kind of went through over long periods of time, you build a trust with one another, right? And it's a genuine friendship. Even though I may not hang out with a lot of people I hung out with in the past, or I don't see a lot of those people, it was a personal thing that I went through. It wasn't as social, right? And it wasn't as, and I'd hate to say this a lot of times, I think a lot of relationships online are extremely phony. They make things look like they're a certain way, and most likely they're not. They may look like that for that moment, right? Especially with photos, it could be videos, whatever the case may be. But then privately, it's nothing like that. And I also think that kind of takes a toll on people with in relationships or building friendships. But I'm going to go to, right now, I think what happens with a lot of guys when they get a divorce. Because I went through a divorce. And I have friends or other people I know that have gone through divorces. And the one thing I see more than ever is them quickly wanting to be in a relationship like they were in their past, or they want a status of being with someone. They don't like to be single for long periods of time. Back to the, social media things, they also know, even if you're not into social media, you are going to be drawn into social media if you usually date someone. Say both of you aren't in the social media in a relationship situation. I can assure you, your friends, your family members, and others are going to be taking pictures and posting. It's impossible to hide from social media, I think, at this point in time. And if you are someone who goes around and says, listen, don't take a picture of me, don't post, don't do this, like group photos, don't do this, eventually you're going to come off as an asshole. You're going to offend people. And you may be like, I don't give a shit, I just don't want to have anything to do with social media, which is fine. But out of the two of you, guy, girl, most likely one of you is involved with social media at this point in time. It's almost ridiculous. If you have kids, most likely they're involved with it, right? You may even have parents that are involved with social media that like to post shit on Facebook. So you are not, you may have colleagues, again, family members. There's no way you're not going to be involved with social media at this point in time. But that too, I think when you get into a relationship with somebody after a divorce, I think people need to, one, just relax. And I don't see that, especially with, I can't say it's with men. I see it with both, actually. I shouldn't say, I was going to actually say, I think I see it with women sometimes more than men, because I think a lot of times after a woman gets divorced, I don't think they mind hitting the dating scene, but I think they like, from what I see more, at least in my opinion is, they like to be in a relationship, I think, maybe more than men sometimes after a divorce. Not always. A lot of women like to go out and do their thing. You know what I mean? Good or bad, whatever the case may be, same with men, good or bad. But I think a majority of women like the comfort of being in a relationship, being a little more grounded. But a lot of men, too, that I see, and after they go through a breakup or a divorce, is the desperation. I've said it before on my podcast. I call it death spirit. I wrote about that in my book, The Wingman, about how once you become desperate, and I think that's what happens after a lot of times with a divorce, and they talk about the rebound and all that bullshit. But the truth is, you being desperate to be in a relationship, I think, is one of the worst things you could ever do. I think that's where so many mistakes are made. And I've talked about this in my program, Mastering Self-Confidence, and my book is, you have to look at when you want to be in a relationship, if you're interested in someone, or just a friendship is taking your time. Just relax, sit back. That stuff doesn't happen, I believe, in a week or a month. And you hear this type of shit, love at first sight and all this type of shit. I call it a spell a lot of times. When you sometimes, and I get some people meet each other, they fall in love, and then it lasts forever, right? And all that type of shit. Well, there's also a billion stories where you meet somebody and you don't realize how nuts they really are. But people don't want to discuss that. There was a funny meme I saw a long time ago that said, and it's kind of funny, but there is a truth to it, and it was like somebody right now is meeting your ex thinking that's their soulmate, but the truth, about who they really are, which that's not a dig necessarily always on your ex, but a lot of times you don't really realize, or you don't even know who you're really truly meeting, right? Especially if you're going to be the one who builds a friendship or a relationship with this one, because the only ones who really know that are the previous ones, right? And let's face it too, a lot of people that have relationships or friends, say, with others, they only know that relationship, through themselves. A lot of people, like I know a ton of people out there, and you do too probably, men and women, that are your close friends and you think are the greatest thing since baked bread and love them, love being around them. But then you've heard, or, you may not see it, but being in a relationship with that person may be a nightmare. But your relationship with them is entirely different. It could be work-related, just friends you work out with. But then to date that person is a totally different, obviously a whole different perspective. So, but I just want to do a podcast about this, because if you're someone out there who's just, divorced, broken up, and even if you can't find somebody, and I talk about this all the time, it's like a catch-22. When you can't find somebody after a breakup or divorce, you have to realize after a certain amount of time, it may be you. You don't want to acknowledge it, but I would almost, I can't say guarantee, but you have probably problems, or you're doing things that are causing a lot of problems for whoever you're interested in not sticking around, right? And a lot of times you hear people complaining there's no one out there and all this bullshit. The truth is there's millions and millions of people out there and near you that are probably single, that are a great catch, but you're either not, you're not giving them the opportunity, or you're just kind of an asshole. Just the truth. And that's just my perspective on it. And so that's really all I got to say about that. I was thinking regarding this podcast. But yeah, please be true to yourself. Take your time. A lot of times, and I discussed this, and I'll wrap it up there, you're going to, the longer, to a certain degree, now I'm not saying like waiting to figure things out for decades, but sometimes the longer you wait to do things, the better off you're going to be, especially having sex. I've discussed that before. I believe that to be true, because you're going to dodge a lot of bullets as soon as you start having sex with somebody. The whole dynamic changes. It's never the same as far as relationships go, right? As far as friendships go, that you want to build friendships with, again, same thing. Take your time. If you meet somebody who's cool, you like to hang out with them, go for beers, sports, all that thing, great. Just cool out. Don't be overbearing. Don't get caught up with, being somebody who's always up someone's ass, where you make it uncomfortable, but if just weird shit, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. So I'm going to wrap it up there. If you get a chance, you might want to check out my YouTube channel. I've been doing a lot of things fitness related on there. So if you're doing anything fitness related, and I'm also visiting all different places all over North America. I'm in New York right now. I just did a video, I haven't edited yet, on an unbelievable Tostitos, whatever the hell, a great taco place I found, numero uno. Oh, it's Los Tacos, numero uno. If you're from New York, most likely you heard about them, but they're delicious, great stuff. So I found that place. I was actually going to go get a slice of Joe's Pizza, but I ended up going to the Mexican place twice back to back. They're long lines, but they move really quick. Anyways, but I've been putting up podcast videos up on many different things regarding my favorite restaurants, coffee shops, gyms, and things in that nature. I'm on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, so you could find me there. I got a book, Wingman, if you ever want to check that out. I'm not here to push my products or any of that shit with my podcast, but yeah, and I have a program, Mastering Self-Confidence. I'm saying these things, I'm saying I'm not pushing it. The reality is I'm just letting you know. And most of the information I give is free, because I just want to make sure I help people, and I definitely don't want people to make the same mistakes over and over again. I think I've done them. I made mistakes, and I just want to help people maybe become self-aware of their mistakes and really not rush anything. I really believe in life, the more you rush anything, to a certain degree, the shittier it ends up. That goes for food or anything. Now, I'm not also saying that some things that you rush through very quickly can kick ass. That's great too. I get it. But for the most part, especially when it comes to building relationships, I think the more you just relax, sit back, and take your time, the better off you're going to be. That goes for anything, even work relationships, whatever the case may be, even if you've been in fights with people, family members, and all that. You know what? Sometimes you just got to sit back, let it ferment, take your time, and just let it happen. All right? All right, I'm going to wrap it up there. Take care, and if you're traveling, safe travels.